Motivational interviewing is something that I've done a number of times, and I really enjoy this topic. And also, I've worked very closely with CHWs in both New York and New Jersey on different grants. And so I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and hearing your thoughts and feedback on some of the stuff we'll be talking about today. All right, so our agenda for the morning, this morning's session, if we go into our agenda. So we're going to talk with just discussing what motivational interviewing is. So I know you are all familiar with each other, and so we don't really need to do a formal introduction since you've been working with each other, but I am going to let you work with each other for a few moments just to discuss, what your understanding is of motivational interviewing. So we'll discuss what motivational interviewing, we'll define it, we'll go over some of the important key terms in that definition. Then we will watch a video with Dr. Rolnick, who is one of the co-creators of motivational interviewing. We'll take a look at, what are some ways to not do MI and evaluate that. And then we'll look at how motivational interviewing can improve a conversation. Also in this morning's session, very important, is we're going to talk about the techniques and skills of motivational interviewing. Specifically OARS, which is an acronym that stands for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summary statements. So by the end of the morning session, hopefully you'll be armed with some of those tools, and then we'll take those skills and apply them to some scenario situations in our afternoon session. So our learning objectives for today's session, by the end of the morning session, where hopefully you'll be able to describe and explain motivational interviewing. You'll be able to demonstrate the basic core key skills of MI, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summary statements. And also we hopefully will facilitate a conversation and be able to explain how is MI motivational interviewing a technique that's especially helpful in managing chronic conditions, and in, for the purpose of your role as CHWs, how is it especially important when addressing vaccine hesitation? All right, so we're going to start with our first question. What is motivational interviewing? And so I'm going to let, before I show you the official definition for MI, I'm going to give you all a few moments to describe to a partner. So if you could just turn to the person next to you, and that will be your partner. Right, so I can't see how many we have. I think we have about 8 or 9 in each classroom. So turn to the person next to you to partner up. If it's an odd number of people, then you can have one group of 3 and just have a brief conversation. And you can jot your notes down on some scrap paper of what is motivational interviewing. So some of you might be very familiar with it and can clearly define it. Some of you, maybe never heard of it before, and maybe you have to take some guesses as to what it is. Either one is fine. We're just trying to get, a startup or a starting point to see what your understanding of motivational interviewing is. So I'm going to set my timer to, let's say 5 minutes. And this will, again, serve as our icebreaker activity for today. So you have about 5 minutes to talk to your partner and discuss, what does motivational interviewing mean to you? How would you define it? And then after 5 minutes, I will open it up to the classrooms. For those of you that have called in, you could just do the reflection on your own and jot down some notes, and we'll allow you to give your feedback as well. And also what I'm going to ask is, at the beginning, so I can get familiar with everyone, when you go to give an answer, if you could just let me know what your name is, and that will be helpful so I can identify everyone in the class. All right, so you have about 5 minutes, and then I'm going to mute myself and then come back in 5 minutes and see what you have. So let's go to Schenectady first. What is it, the Schenectady Avengers?
Yeah, it's supposed to be. I didn't have my copy when I typed it.
And I love Marvel movies, so I'd love to see that.
Me too.
I'm a Marvel movie geek. I have to
yes. You're winning on this side.
All right, good. I got in. All right, so Schenectady. Let's see what some of your thoughts are on defining motivational interviewing. So who would like to speak first? If you could just let me know your name.
I actually haven't specifically heard. My name is Michaela, by the way, or Mickey. I prefer to go by Mickey.
Okay.
Specifically heard about like motivational interviewing prior to this training, and I've done trainings with like similar, what I believe to be similar ideas. So what I'm assuming this is about, or kind of in the realm of, is like an interview style or like medium of like communication that like intentionally draws out specific like goals, aspirations, or motivations from someone in order to get like, or like their passions even, to get like a scope of like who they are and even motivate them in the workplace if they get the job or whatever, or like when you're trying to get information. That's my take on it.
Okay. All right. I love that. So I'm just jotting some notes as you guys give feedback. So something, Mickey, that really stands out to me that you said is drawing out goals and motivation. And that's really important. Those are some key words there in defining MI, because we're not motivating other people. We're drawing out their own desire to try to reach some goals and make some changes. So that's really important. Thank you so much for that, Mickey. Is there maybe one other person in the Schenectady that wants to share, or was that a collective response for the group?
No, that was pretty much.
They said it best.
Yeah.
You like it. Okay, ditto. Now let's go to Syracuse. Okay, so Syracuse, I'd like to hear, what your thoughts are in defining what motivational interviewing is. So why don't we start with who would like to speak from Syracuse first? If you can just tell us what your name is and your preferred pronouns, and then tell us, what your discussion was about.
One of the things that we came up with is encouragement. Encouragement words.
Good. Absolutely. So that's really important. With regards to motivational interviewing, encouragement and support is really important. And in a non-judgmental way, right? So we're not telling people what they should do, right? We're just saying, you need to decide what's best for you, and I'm here to encourage and support you through that process. All right, so back to the definition. So anyone who's calling in, is there anything you would like to add on your take on motivational interviewing for defining it? So you could feel free to write in the chat box, or if you would like to unmute and speak, you're more than welcome to do that as well. All right, so I'm going to say silence means you guys are good. All right, so let's continue with this. So things that really stood out to me with both Schenectady and Syracuse's take on defining what motivational interviewing is. Like I said, we have Schenectady says draws out goals, motivation, passions, really important. And then Syracuse really talked about being supportive and encouraging an individual along that process. So these are really great starting points. And what we'll see on the next slide is the official definition for motivational interviewing. Now, the definition comes from Dr. Miller and Dr. Rolnick, which are the two key players in the creation of motivational interviewing. And we'll talk a little bit about the history of it in a moment. All right, so here is your official definition from Dr. Miller and Dr. Rolnick. So motivational interviewing, you'll often see it called MI. That's an abbreviation for it. So motivational interviewing, or MI, is a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication with particular attention to the language of change. It is designed to strengthen personal motivation for and commitment to a specific goal by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. So there's a lot of keywords in this definition, and we'll kind of go through all of them. But some that are really standing out to me is this word collaborative, right? So it's about working with your clients, not you are not the expert in your client's life. You are there to find out what works best for them and to collaborate and support them through the process and encourage them, like our Syracuse office had said. Goal-oriented, so we're focusing on what are some changes the individual or the client would like to make. Language of change, so something that we're going to talk about this afternoon is really on being able to identify when the client is making statements that indicate they would like to change their behavior. And so that's what they're talking about in that term, language of change. Personal motivation also stands out to me because that's talking about your own desire to change your behavior. So often in motivational interviewing, we refer to that as intrinsic motivation. So your inner desire to make the change. And that's what we really want to focus on in motivational interviewing, which is really brings us to this other statement, person's own reasons for change. That is the personal motivation. That's the intrinsic motivation. Okay, so we have this definition to start with, a lot of key words in the definition, and we'll be talking about them in more detail throughout today's session. All right, motivational interviewing is a guiding style of communication that sits between following and directing. So, there are three major ways to communicate, right? So we can be directive, which means in directive, we're telling somebody what it is that they need to do. So you need to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how you do it, right? That's a very directive type of communication style. Following is a type of communication style where I would just listen to what you want to do, right? What steps you want to make to maybe change behavior. And I would just let you take the lead. Okay, that's what you want to do. Go ahead. You take the lead on it. But in motivational interviewing, we're trying to be somewhere in the middle. So what we're trying to do is to guide. So we're not telling individuals what they need to do, but we're also not leaving them on their own to their own devices, right? We want to be there to support them through the process. So in communication styles with motivational interviewing, the focus is upon guiding the individual through the process of changing their behavior. It is designed to empower people to change by drawing out their own meaning, importance, and capacity for change. So again, this goes back to Mickey's comment from Schenectady about we have to kind of draw out their own desire. We have to, the word that they often use in motivational interviewing is eliciting their own desire for change. Eliciting is trying to draw out their reasons for change. And so in the whole process of motivational interviewing, our goal is to make the client feel more empowered, more confident in their ability to change their behavior. It's based on a respectful and curious way of being with people that facilitates the natural process of change and honors client autonomy. So it's about being respectful. It's about not being non-judgmental. And it's about being curious. We need to find out more, right? We don't want just what's on the surface. Our job is to really form a connection with our clients and to dig a little bit deeper and have a better understanding of their situation and their reasons for making change. Okay, we can go to the next slide, Consuelo. So when is motivational interviewing best to use? So when does it work best? So it works really good when a client is ambivalent about something. And we'll talk more about ambivalence after the lunch break. But ambivalence, we've probably all felt ambivalent about certain things. So ambivalence is when we're kind of stuck in the middle, right? We know that there's a behavior change we want to make, right? Like, let's say, for example, I want to exercise more, right? This is the behavior change I'm looking to make. And I'm somewhat ambivalent about it. So on the one hand, I know that if I exercise, I'll have more energy. I will feel better. I won't be as, achy when I wake up in the morning, right? I have some reasons that I want to change my behavior. But at the same time, even though I know there's benefits to me exercising, it also is time consuming. And, there hasn't been really an exercise regimen that I found enjoyable or one that I can commit to long term. So that's an example of ambivalence, right? When somebody feels ambivalent, you do have reasons that you want to change the behavior, but you also have reasons that you don't want to change the behavior. And so motivational interviewing loves when people are ambivalent because it means that they do realize there's benefits to changing behavior, their behavior. So your goal as a motivational interviewer is to try to get the individual to focus more on changing the behavior. So it loves ambivalence. Ambivalence is good. Confidence is low. If you have an individual that's not feeling very confident in their ability to change or has some doubts, motivational interviewing is a great approach to use because it really is designed to build the individual's confidence. And we'll talk about a little bit what is one of the skills that helps to build their confidence. And also if their desire is fairly low, right? We can ask questions of our clients to really try to find out, maybe discuss some reasons for making the change, right? So they might not have a lot of desire at the beginning, but motivational interviewing can really tap into that desire. And if they don't really think it's that important right now, we can use motivational interviewing to try to get the individual to start to realize the value in changing that behavior. All right, so we are going to do an exercise. It's called a taste of motivational interviewing. So this is actually in your handout. So this is in your workbook, the handouts that were given to you. It's on page 4, but it's titled A Taste of Motivational Interviewing. You're going to need to pick one partner to work with, right? So this one is really important that you break into pairs. And again, if there is an odd number, you can have one group of 3, but the preference is for this to be a 2-person activity, 3-person only if you need to, if you have an odd number in the room. Okay, so now what you want to do is choose one person in your pair to be the speaker and one person to be the listener. And for any of you that are in a group of 3, so I know in Schenectady, Shalonda, Amy, and Anna, you're in a group of 3. If you could choose one person to be the observer. So one person to be the speaker, one person to be the listener, and if you are in a group of 3, one person to be the observer. So give you a moment, decide who's going to be which role, because you only need to read your section for it. And what we'll do, we're going to have a couple of other role plays throughout today. So who you're working with now for your role play is going to be your partner for the remainder of the day. So hopefully you like them, because you'll be working with them all day. Okay, so hopefully you've determined who's the speaker and who's the listener. And the other exercises where we do role plays, you can switch your roles. But for now, whoever is the speaker, your instructions are right on the handout. It says, for the speaker role, identify a change that you are considering making, but have not definitely decided. It will be something you feel 2 ways about. It might be a change that would be good for you, that you should make for some reason, but have been putting it off. And you're going to tell your partner about this change that you're considering. So for the speaker, you're going to show your ambivalence about something, right? So I just gave you my example is exercising. So you may have something similar to that. It could be health related. It could be work related. It could be, anything. It does not have to be related to work. It could just be, something in your life. So the speaker, you just need to talk about something that you are, you're kind of torn on changing, right? You have reasons to change it, reasons to not change it. Okay, so that's the speaker role. Those of you who are assigned the listener role, you are going to basically listen to your partner. Here's what I do not want you doing in this role play. I don't want you to persuade them one way or the other. I don't want you to try to fix anything for them. I don't want you to give any advice. And this is really hard because we often do have a tendency in conversations to sometimes take up one side of the argument. So I don't want you doing any of that. Don't try to persuade them. Don't try to convince them. Don't try to give them advice. All we want you to do is to really listen to them and take a look at the questions that are bolded in the handout. So those questions will help guide the conversation. So use those questions as your script. And you'll see in that script that the words that are italicized gives you some instructions, right? So It's very straightforward for our listeners that you're going to follow those bolded questions and the directions in italics. So speakers, you're going to talk about something you're thinking about changing, but you're stuck in between. And our listeners are going to use those questions to guide their conversation. But remember, your role, your job is to not give advice, to not try to persuade or convince them to do one thing or the other. You're there to listen. Okay, so I am going to set the timer to 7 minutes for this exercise. So 7 minutes. I will be here. I'm going to mute myself. I will be here. If you have any questions, you could unmute and ask me. But I'll mute my audio and then I will let you know when your time is up. So before we do that, Schenectady or Syracuse, do you have any questions? Give me a thumbs up if you think you're ready to go. Or raise your hand. There we go. Okay, good. All right, I'm putting it on the clock. You got 7 minutes. Instructions are right there in that handout. And then we'll debrief this exercise once it's over. So good luck. And so I'm going to open it up to whoever would like to share your thoughts. So let's start with Syracuse this time. Let's go to Syracuse. So Syracuse, our group at Syracuse, what was this process like for you? What did you notice in doing this conversation?
Go ahead, Makiko. When we did this exercise, I feel that I was strongly on my opinion. How I feel about the topic in hand.
Okay. Second. So you were the speaker.
Yes.
Okay. So you felt very strongly about this decision that you're struggling with. So let me ask you a question. Your partner, who is the listener, did you feel that they were trying to push you one way or the other, or were they really just trying to understand where you were coming from?
They were trying to understand where I'm coming from.
Okay. And how did that make you feel as the speaker, to have somebody that isn't really telling you one way or the other? They're just listening to you.
I felt okay because it's my decision. And can't nobody make me do nothing I don't want to do.
Okay, I love that. So what you're talking about, what you just said, in motivational interviewing, we refer to that as honoring the person's autonomy, meaning that your partner just listened to you, some questions to better understand your situation, but didn't lead you one way or the other, because they were respecting the fact that you are an individual, you are an adult, and ultimately it's up to you to make the decision that works best for you. And so in motivational interviewing, we really try to emphasize that ultimately it is up to the other person and we have to honor their autonomy. So I love to hear that. Thank you for sharing that from Syracuse. Who was that was speaking?
Makiko.
Okay, Makiko, thank you so much for sharing that. Because
You're welcome.
That really emphasizes one of the key components of motivational interviewing is about honoring autonomy. And so we see that Makiko felt like her personhood was honored in that exercise, and that the person was just there to listen and support. All right, wonderful. Let's go to Schenectady. Schenectady, what was the process like for you in doing this exercise? What did you notice in your conversation?
Anna?
Okay,
So,
Anna.
One that was laying out, right? She actually is the mastermind, sorry to use that word, behind the 518 free store. So that throughout these trainings, every time you hear her talk, it's about the 518, 518, 518. So one of the things that she raised, right, was that I have been wanting to organize the free store, i.e. the shelves. I want to put up shelves, right? There's a need for the shelves for the community. Let me just refer to this. It will improve the functionality, the ability of the community to come in and choose whatever items they need, right? The struggle has been, right, that she has so many other community commitments, right, and she has a child, right? So that childcare plays into this, right? Other community responsibilities, plus the fact that all this is so overwhelming that it develops a sense of procrastination to an extent. Though she understands that if this is not done, it will affect the effectiveness of displaced jaw because it has to keep moving. If it stagnates, it's going to collapse. So, she ultimately, after some conversation, she said, shoot, maybe there is a person I could delegate this to with some of my ideas, so that this can take place. So it was really good. It was a well-rounded. We went. It was like really fun to struggle through this, you know.
So Anna, who is your partner?
We have the two queens here. Okay.
Oh, that's right. You were
Corners. Right.
Amy, Amanda, and Shalonda. So
Yes.
Anna, who was the speaker in your group? Was it Amy or Shalonda?
Yeah, it was Amy, but Amy's having a little bit of a sore throat problem, so
That's
she
okay.
asked me.
No. I was the speaker. Amy was the listener. Yeah, you were the observer.
Oh, yeah.
You're
So
the observer.
Amy was the speaker, Anna was the listener, and Shalonda was the observer. correct?
No. So I was the speaker, Amy was the listener, and then Anna was the observer. So Anna spoke for our group because she had observed the whole thing.
Gotcha. Okay, so let me point out, first of all, what Anna just did was fabulous. Anna just summarized the conversation. And in motivational interviewing, it is so important that we can effectively summarize what we just discussed with our partner. Right? And I understand Anna was the observer, but still, she really gave a good summary. And what I loved about your summary, Anna, is that you were able to highlight both sides of it. Right? You were highlighting the fact that the importance in, getting this, I guess it was like a community, like shelves with resources for the community is important. And at the same time, you also acknowledged why it was such a struggle. So this is key that we're able to effectively summarize and highlight both sides of the ambivalence, right? Because your partner was feeling ambivalent about something, and we were able to highlight both sides of it. Also, what I hear you're saying, Anna, and I think is wonderful, is that it sounds as though the speaker was able to come to a conclusion on her own in the conversation as she was allowed to talk to her partner with it. Is that correct in what I'm saying?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Okay. So what's really important is that the speaker came to this resolution on their own. Now, did they have support in getting there? Yes. Right. And that is part of motivational interviewing. But this speaker has now owned it, meaning that they've come to a conclusion, they've come to a decision, and they have ownership over it. And the likelihood that they'll follow through with it is much higher than if, Anna, you came in and said, this is what you need to do. This is how you have to fix it. If you did it that way, then the speaker wouldn't feel ownership over it. So those are two really important things. So thank you so much for sharing that, Anna, and to your group, which was Amy and Shalonda.
May I just say something, Mr.
Yeah,
Sisi?
absolutely.
I want to be clear. Nothing, as a matter of fact, I jotted down notes. Everything came from the person that founded the 518 store. So I just summarized. So I think that's very important in motivational interviewing, that you don't come in and nationalize and bogart the conversation and impose and say, well, Shawanda, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
She actually was drawn out. And as a matter of fact, she was more than willing to just open up because she was clear on her issues. That's the important part.
Yeah, I think there's nothing worse as a CHW to come in and talk to your clients as if you're the expert, because you're not. You're not the expert in their life. Do you know resources in the community that could help them? Absolutely. Could you offer some suggestions if they're open to hearing it? Absolutely. But ultimately, it's up to them to decide, like we saw with the Syracuse, right? We need to honor their autonomy. And ultimately, it's up to the individual to have their own desire and their own motivation and to make their own goals, right? And set their own goals, and they'll have more ownership over it. And when they own it, they'll be more likely to do it. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that, Schenectady. So again, this exercise is just to kind of get your toes wet a little bit about motivational interviewing and what it feels like, right? What's the essence of motivational interviewing? Okay, so just a little bit about the background or the story of motivational interviewing. So we can go to the next slide, Consolo. Thank you. So the story of motivational interviewing, where did it come about? So Dr. Miller, who is the founder of motivational interviewing, and then a little bit further along in his career, he collaborated with Dr. Rolnick in writing the books about motivational interviewing. Dr. Miller was working in drug and alcohol counseling, right, back in the 70s. And he was a psychiatrist, and what he noticed, or psychologist, what he noticed in his work and working in these facilities is that they used a very directive communication style. So basically, they told the clients, this is what you need to do, right? This is what you need to do to get your life back on track. This is what you need to do to stop drinking or stop using drugs. And if you don't do this, this is going to be the consequences. You're going to end up in jail. You're going to lose your family. You're going to lose your job, whatever it is, right? And often what they would use is they would have recovering addicts that would work with people in the drug and alcohol center, treatment centers, and kind of use like a tough love approach. Like, I pulled myself up by my bootstraps, you can do it too. And so what he found is that he found it to be very confrontational, right? And basically telling these clients, this is what you need to do. This is what you have to do. You must do, right? Using words like that. And two things that he found. First of all, when somebody is, and this goes back to the Syracuse office's feedback on that role play, right? That Malika felt very heard. She felt like her decision was her decision to be made. She didn't feel like she was being convinced or forced in any way. And that made Malika feel very good about the conversation. And so what we found, or what Dr. Miller found in this approach, was that people got very defensive because they started to argue like, well, stop, don't tell me what to do. This is why I did it. This is why I continue to do it. So they would become very confrontational. And also, if they would change their behavior, often the behavior change wasn't long-term, meaning that these individuals would maybe get clean for a period of time and then end up back in these rehabilitation centers. And so the change wasn't long-term. And one of the thoughts Dr. Miller had was that the reason the change wasn't long-term is because we didn't allow the individual to determine their reasons for changing. They changed because all these external factors, all these external people were telling them what they needed to do. So this is where enters Dr. Miller. Dr. Miller, he was studying, he was new in the field, observed this and said, I don't think this is working. I don't think this is the most effective approach. So let's go to the next slide, Consolo. And this is where Dr. Miller entered. So Dr. Miller, like I said, is a professor of psychology and psychiatry. And he claims, quote unquote, that he accidentally, as a student in training, discovered that perhaps there's another approach that might be more effective and positively effective in changing the behaviors of individuals who suffer from addiction. So what were his approaches focused on, right? What do you think his new thing that he came up with? His new approach focused on two major things: listening, not just hearing what somebody says, but actually listening. So what you did in your role play, you were asked to listen, to demonstrate that you've heard the individual. So listening and expressing empathy, meaning you're able to put yourself in the shoes of the other individual and understand how difficult changing behavior can be. And you were able to put yourself in the shoes of the other individual and understand how it's very common to feel ambivalent about things, right? That there might be reasons you want to change, but there's also reasons why it's very difficult to change. And that is essentially where motivational interviewing came up, right? This is how he came up with it. He found the approach that was used in drug and alcohol counseling not very effective. So what if we tried an approach where we actually listen to the person and express some empathy? Would that bring about change? Okay, so we're going to watch a video about motivational interviewing. And as you watch this video, I'd like you to think about two things. So the two questions I'd like you to think about as you watch the video is, what struck you about how the doctor approached the patient? So look at the doctor-patient interaction. What sticks out to you about the approach the doctor took with the patient? And it says, as healthcare providers, right, your CHWs, your healthcare providers, we typically give advice to our patients or our clients or directives on what you need to do. In what ways is this conversation that you're going to watch in the video different, right? So think about if you've ever gone to a doctor, or if you've taken a family member or a friend to the doctor and the doctor says, well, your glucose levels are really high. Let's say it's a patient with diabetes. Your glucose levels are really high. You're not controlling them. You need to change your diet. You need to cut your carbohydrates out. You need to cut back on your sugar intake. You need to exercise more. Your medication, you're not taking your medication regularly. You need to take your medication regularly, right? So we often hear that in a physician setting, right? Where it's very directive. This is what you need to do. So what I'd like you to do is you watch this video. How does this approach differ from that more traditional approach that we often experience in healthcare settings? All right, so let's take a look at the video and then we'll debrief with those discussion questions after.
I don't think it's the case that people are either not motivated or motivated. And in fact, motivational interviewing was born from conversations with very, very difficult people who were classified as not at all motivated to change and very resistant to treatment. Well, Mr. Smith, that's your medication sorted out.
Good.
Blood pressure's a little on the high side.
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if I could raise the subject of your weight.
What?
I wondered if we could spend just a couple of minutes talking about your weight.
You are joking, aren't you? I mean, look, I've made time in my day to come here.
Yeah.
I'm kept in your waiting room for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's not acceptable.
Yeah.
If I make an appointment with
Yeah.
a client for 10, I expect them to start at 10, not quarter to 11.
Right, and so you're busy enough. And
I've got other things to do. I've got
Yeah.
accounts to do. I've got clients to coming in.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily easy for you to make the time to come down, and you had to wait in the waiting room. And now I raise the subject of weight.
Yeah,
just
I mean,
when you're
okay,
thinking
fair
of going.
enough. I've got to have my blood pressure
Yeah.
medication changed, but I
Yeah.
really haven't got time to talk about my weight. I mean, I'm aware of my weight, I'm aware of the problems, and I'm also aware of the solutions.
Right.
So I don't really need a discussion. It's just I've got too much to do at the moment,
Right, and so it's been a bit of a rush for you coming in.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry about the wait in the waiting
Well,
room.
it's bad form,
Yeah, yeah, that's not easy for you because you'd like to go really soon, and here I am asking you to spend just a couple of minutes with me.
Yeah, but basically I've got things to do. I've got to
Yeah.
get back to the office. I've got a pile of work that
Yeah.
I've got to deal with.
Yep.
And every moment out of my day
Yeah.
means I have to work in the evening or
Yeah.
weekends.
It counts.
Or when you're self-employed, you haven't got a choice,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly, exactly. It's up to you. Just a couple of minutes.
Well, I'm here now, so yeah, okay, if it's a couple of minutes, yeah?
I promise.
Okay,
promise.
because I really must get on.
I want to simply ask you how you feel about it.
About what? Losing weight? Well, obviously, I want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? I mean, I'm aware that I'm over my balance weight, but I know that it's causing problems. I mean, obviously, I get out of breath if I have to do something a bit hurry, and I realise that I'm on this blood pressure.
Right.
And maybe that's probably contributing to it.
Right. So you can see the links between your weight and your health, and you'd like things to be.
Yeah, I mean,
better.
there are other things, but I mean, yeah, the weight is something I would like to get hold of. You get the handle on. Yeah.
You'd like to if you could.
Yeah, I mean, I know the theories of a bit of exercise on a regular basis, a balanced diet, but unfortunately, because of my lifestyle, because of being self-employed as an accountant, it's finding the time to exercise, but also finding the time to sort of think, okay, I'm going to go shopping for this, that, and the other, and then I'm going to prepare a meal.
Yeah.
With me, it's very often
ready meals and that sort of thing.
Yeah, food on the run, you know.
Okay, yeah.
Grazing.
Let me see if I can summarize what you've said, and then we'll see what next. You lead a busy life.
Yeah.
You run a business, and you've got a lot to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're aware of the links between your health and your weight, and you are concerned to some extent about that. And ideally, it sounds like you'd like to do something about it. It's just that your life is busy and rushed, and you tend to use convenience foods in order to get the work done.
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, because of my lifestyle, food is just fuel.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, because I'm juggling all these balls and I don't want to drop any.
I get it, I get it. And so if you could fit it in, you would like things to be different, but that's not so easy.
No.
Okay. Can I suggest that you come back and see me in a couple of weeks' time just to chat about this?
Okay, I'm up for that, but it's going to be the same problem of A, finding time,
Right.
and B, if I make an appointment,
Right.
I don't expect to be kept waiting for half an hour or
Exactly.
whatever, because it's...
Exactly. I'll tell you what might be a nice solution is if you come down first appointment, and I give you an appointment at 8:30.
That'd be good.
Then there'll be absolutely no waiting. And the purpose of that visit will be to have a look at how you really feel about how you could move forward and somehow fit in a more healthier lifestyle into the busy work life that you've got.
I'll maybe have a look at my schedules, see whether
Yeah.
anything can be arranged, or I can pass something
Yeah.
on to some, and so that so
if
it's not a wasted interview. So I can come here and say, okay, I've looked at my schedules, I've looked at things,
Good.
whatever.
Good. And see if you can fix it up and also give some thought to what we've talked about.
Yeah, of course.
Good stuff. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, all the
Sorry I went
best
off a
then.
bit.
A few well-chosen words, a very thoughtful question, can be worth more than many mouthfuls of busy talk.
Well, I want to try to stop smoking.
That's quite a decision.
Well, it is because I've been smoking all my life.
We could talk about adjusting your diet. Okay. We could talk about adjusting your exercise or getting more exercise.
Right.
Or perhaps anything else that you think is relevant. And I'm wondering what makes the most sense to you.
All right. So we saw in that demonstration, right? The client came in and the practitioner initially thought the conversation should be talking about the client's weight and reducing their weight, but saw that the client was very defensive at first. And so he kind of switched his approach very quickly. So let's start with Schenectady this time. So Schenectady, what struck you in this video? What stood out to you in this video? How was this conversation maybe a little bit different than a more directive approach?
Hi, this is Quina. I like the conversation. He heard his patient's grievances. Don't have him waiting an hour and a half to be seen, and he basically let him answer his own questions and his own answers, and still was like, "Hey, when you make time in your schedule, can we revisit this conversation?" And I liked how he just allowed the patient to guide himself through the conversation. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did definitely get the feeling that at the end of this meeting with this patient, the patient definitely felt more control over the situation. And I think part of the problem is, I'm sure we've all experienced this, waiting a long time in the waiting room and feeling so frustrated and out of control. That, you know, this practitioner really made a point so that the client felt more in control of the situation, because that waiting did make him feel that he didn't. All right, wonderful. Thank you for that feedback, Schenectady. Syracuse, how about you? What stood out to you about this approach?
Anybody? Mr. Ali?
This is Ali. I really liked the way that he was using the motivational interviewing techniques, and that he was letting the client talk and not interrupting him. So basically, yes, just as the previous answer was, the gentleman was answering the questions himself. So, you know, he came to his own conclusions, and the interviewer let him get to that point by not interrupting him and not being combative with him about the late and waiting in the waiting room, etc.
Absolutely. So he heard his concerns, he heard his frustration, and then he was able to redirect. So in motivational interviewing, we can redirect the conversation, right? So we hear the client's frustration with the wait time, we acknowledge it, we validate it, we empathize with them. And then you can see the practitioner used a way to redirect the conversation and focus more on the patient's health. But a couple of things, like Syracuse said, you heard a lot of the patient talking, not as much as the practitioner talking. That is really important. So when you're using motivational interviewing with your clients, if you're talking more than your clients, check yourself, because then you're not using MI, right? They should be talking more than you. And just like Syracuse said, that the client came, or the patient came to their own conclusions. And that is really important in motivational interviewing. We don't want to connect the dots for them. We need them to connect the dots themselves, because they'll have more ownership over it. All right, excellent. Thank you both so much. And I'll open it up to the other people on the call. Is there anyone else that would like to add anything? So largely due to the work of Dr. Miller showing successful outcomes, a more effective philosophy for change conversations among helping professionals has emerged, right? So this idea of motivational interviewing and about the approach that should be used is a lot more effective than the more traditional approaches. So rather than it being the CHW's job to motivate the client for change, because we can't motivate other people to make change. And if they do make change because you're trying to motivate them, it might be very short term, it won't be long term. So rather than us trying to motivate our clients to change their behavior, it is our job to help people find their own motivation for change, the motivation for change that lies within them. So that should be your focus when you talk with your CHWs, right? So yes, in this video, yes, the practitioner really is concerned about the client's weight, but the practitioner also realized that if he spent most of the time telling the client what they need to do or why they need to do it, it most likely will not, it'll just make the client even more defensive. So rather he let the client draw their own conclusions, connect their own dots, and then they'll have more vested interest in it. So motivational interviewing has been successful. Now, obviously, it originally started in drug and alcohol counseling models, right? But then it has expanded over the 30 plus years that it's been around. So it's been studied in different clinical trials, and it's been used by a number of different professions. So physicians use it, counselors use it, health coaches use it, CHWs use it. I've even done trainings with motivational interviewing for people that are customer facing jobs, right? Where they're working with customers, they're working with clients in the education field possibly. So motivational interviewing is definitely one of those skills that, although it was founded in one area, it has expanded beyond that. So if we go to the next slide, we can see all the different ways in which MI can be used and have brought about positive results. So you can see it has helped with different chronic conditions. It has helped with substance use and addiction. It has helped with behavior change. And it has helped also in mental health conditions. So it has been studied, it has been verified, and it has been proven to be successful in a number of different areas. So we go to the next slide. So MI is very helpful in a primary care setting because it's pretty brief, right? We don't have to have these long drawn out conversations. It's really about what we are hearing the individual say and what kind of open-ended questions we're asking. It's generalized, like I said, it can be used across a number of different areas, and it doesn't have to be used alone. I mean, you can have other treatment methods that are used in conjunction with motivational interviewing. And it's easy, I shouldn't say it's easy to learn because it is a skill that needs to be practiced, but it is easy to digest the information. The important thing with MI, though, is practicing it. And the more you practice it, the more you use it with your clients, the better you will get at it. So with that being said, you're not going to come out of today's 8-hour session and be an expert on motivational interviewing, but you will have a general foundational understanding of what MI is, what are the skills attached to motivational interviewing, and it will give you a starting point to start practicing using MI with your clients. And like I said, the more you use it, the better it will work. Okay, so one of the things that we talk about with motivational interviewing is the spirit of motivational interviewing. It's kind of the foundational part of MI. So before we even get into the skills, we need to talk about the spirit. So when I think of the spirit of MI, it's pretty much the way, your way of being. How are you going to use it? What do you need to be capturing in order to effectively perform motivational interviewing? So they use this acronym CAPE, C-A-P-E. And this acronym captures the spirit of motivational interviewing, or the essence. So when you are practicing motivational interviewing, you need to be compassionate. You need to show acceptance. You need to create a partnership. And you need to display evocation or practice evocation. So those are four terms that are really important. So if somebody says to you, well, what is the spirit of motivational interviewing? You want to think of that acronym CAPE: compassion, acceptance, partnership, and evocation. So let's go through what each of these means. So let's start with compassion. So with compassion, the practitioner, the person using motivational interviewing, is really focusing on promoting and prioritizing the client's well-being and doing what the client feels is best for them, right? So compassion, often empathy goes along with compassion, right? So we're trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the individuals that we're working with, and we're trying to support them in a way where we prioritize what their needs and their desires and their wants are. So that is the compassion component of motivational interviewing. The A in CAPE stands for acceptance. So what I really think is important with acceptance is that it's coming from a non-judgmental perspective, right? So we have to make sure it's very important that our clients do not feel that we want them to do one thing over the other. We want our clients to feel like we are here to support you through the process. Ultimately, what you decide is up to you. So acceptance is about being non-judgmental. It's really understanding the experience, of our clients, really trying to understand their perspective. In acceptance, one thing that we can often do is highlight their strengths, right? So you might have a client that's struggling right now, but they've been successful in the past. And we can acknowledge that success and talk about that success. And then that final one is about honoring autonomy. We have to respect the person's right to make their change or not make their change. Okay, so we have compassion. It's about being supportive, encouraging, empathetic. Acceptance is about non-judgmental, honoring their autonomy. The P is partnership. So partnership, meaning this goes back to that definition I shared with the very beginning of motivational interviewing, a collaborative approach. Partnership is about collaborating, working with your clients. Like I said, if you come into your interactions with your clients and you position yourself as the expert, then you are not doing it within the spirit of MI, because you aren't the expert. Essentially, the client is the expert in their own life. So you are not above the other person. You are not better than the other person. You're not all-knowing and the wise one that tells them what to do. You want to make sure that your conversation with your clients is equal, and that when decisions are made, you're there to inform them of any information that they need to make their decision. Right? And you can maybe offer them some options, and we'll talk about later how to do that. You can offer them some options, but it's very important that the client has ultimately made that decision. And again, with the partnership, it's about, them making a decision that works best for them, and as long as it's informed. And then finally, the last letter in the acronym CAPE is E for evocation. So evocation, you want to think of the word drawing out, and that was something that was shared at the very beginning. I think it was Mickey that shared for her understanding of motivational interviewing, is drawing out, evocation. So the thought in motivational interviewing is that people have within them the resources and the skills that are needed to make change. But sometimes they don't know that they have the resources, and they don't know that they have the skills. So what we're to do in motivational interviewing is we are trying to draw out or evoke what are the client's main priorities? What are the main things they want to address? What are the things that are important to them? What are the things that they value? And what do they know? What is their experience? What wisdom can they share in this conversation? And ultimately, what we do in evocation is we are really trying to draw out and explore the reasons that the individual wants to make the change. Not the reasons we think they need to make the change, but the reasons they want to make the change. And in that way, we can support their success. So here's a quote from Dr. Miller. And Dr. Rolnick, like I said, he is another important component of motivational interviewing. He was the one that in the 80s started to write books with Dr. Miller about MI. And Butler is another one who has collaborated with Miller and Rolnick as well. So it says, in the spirit of MI, this quote, often healthcare involves giving persons what they lack. So what are you missing? You don't have information? Let me give it to you. You don't know why you need to change this? Let me tell you why. But MI is not about telling you what you lack. It actually seeks to evoke from the person's what they already have. So they already have experiences. They already have desires. They already have some knowledge, some experience, some perspective. Our job is to draw that out and to use that in making steps to make change. So MI seeks to understand the patient's perspective by evoking their own reasons and arguments for change. So it's really important, if you question, am I using motivational interviewing with my clients? You have to ask yourself the question, does my client's desire to change, is that their own desire, or is that something that has been imposed on them by me, by family, by friends, by coworkers, by programs that they want to enroll in? We really want to make sure that it's their own desire to make that change. All right, so we're going to pause actually, yeah, let's go over this and then we'll take a pause. So this just recaps what I was saying earlier. Where MI is all about honoring the client's autonomy. So it's ultimately up to the individual to decide if they want to make the change. And Rolnick, Miller, and Butler says there's something in human nature that resists being coerced and told what to do. Ironically, it is acknowledging the other's right and freedom not to change that sometimes makes change possible, right? So we're actually will more likely bring about change if we acknowledge and recognize the fact that you don't have to change your behavior if you don't want to. When we try to push against somebody and try to force them or coerce them, they're just going to get defensive and be less likely to change. So community health workers, your job, you can inform, right? And we'll talk about how to provide information. You can give advice or share information. Again, and we'll talk about how to do this in an MI adherent way. But ultimately, remember that it is your client who decides what to do. And honoring that client's autonomy is what can facilitate change. Okay, so when we get back from our break, we're going to take a look at a video demonstrating what not to do with motivational interviewing, and then we'll debrief that.
I just wanted to say something right quick before we went out on
absolutely.
break. One, I wanted to commend you for how you started the train today. I appreciate the way that you were able to adapt to the way we were coming into the meeting, but I just kind of wanted to address something a little bit. Me being an older gentleman and coming in and working with young folks, I've been having to be challenged on some of the things I thought were norms. And at first, sometimes maybe I could be a little off-put by it because I'm not used to it, but understanding how I need to connect with them and cross that bridge and give them, all the respect that they deserve so that this movement can go forward. And I know sometimes these things are new for us, but if we could really try to kind of not necessarily embody them, but understand where they're coming from and meet them at that way, I think if we know that there's people in Syracuse and there's people across the part of the state that are fighting the same fight and understand us, it just gives us that much more ammunition. So if that's something that we could just try to hold on to as we go out, I would appreciate it.
Absolutely.
I want to add to that.
Yeah.
I think specifically we're talking about pronouns, which are incredibly important. They may not be, they may be a new conversation for some, and like sometimes a different conversation to bring up. But if we are community health workers, we're going to be working with everyone in the community, and everyone in the community means everyone. And pronouns are incredibly important to a section of our population. So we really, I don't know if there's going to be a space at the end but we really need to have a conversation about pronouns. I see everyone kind of moving around and leaving and things of that nature, but we really need to have a serious conversation about pronouns. We are going to be working with trans and gender nonconforming folks in the community, and we are also co-working with trans and gender nonconforming folks. And it is really gaslighting to say, that may be too difficult of a conversation to breach, or everybody doesn't need to understand that. Everybody, if we're community health workers, it's part of the community that we need to be helping.
No,
we have to have those conversations.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. In motivational interviewing, one of the key things is about meeting the person where they're at. And I agree. I think in understanding, finding out how a person identifies, what are the pronouns that they prefer, what is the name that they prefer to be used, to be addressed. I think those are essential, and really engaging. And you're trying to build a trusting relationship and a respectful relationship. So I will talk to Consolo and make sure that between today and tomorrow that is something that is absolutely addressed. So thank you for sharing that suggestion. So I do want to just comment real quick about the feedback we got right before the break, and just say two things again. When we talk about preferred personal pronouns and, referring to a client in the name that they prefer. These are really important things to know because we need to, again, meet the individual where they're at, right? So learning more about our clients is really essential. And I also want to point out the comment that was made from Schenectady before our break really demonstrates a level of self-awareness and ability to self-reflect. And in motivational interviewing, it is so important that you as the practitioner are able to self-reflect. And it's so important that you are able to have a level of self-awareness and realize where, you know, in situations with clients where maybe you're not allowing them to come to their own decisions, or maybe you're not empathizing or showing compassion towards them. So it is really important when using motivational interviewing that you're always on this journey of doing some self-reflection and thinking about your interactions and where it could improve, where it could be different. And you may perhaps come across situations that you're not very familiar with, and you might need to learn a little bit more. And again, that's why it's really important to engage your client to better understand their situation, their perspective, their experience, their life. So again, Schenectady, thank you for that comment before break. All right, so what we're gonna do now is take a look at a video with motivational, well, I should say without motivational interviewing, because it's not a great demonstration of motivational interviewing. And after we get back, we're going to have a couple of questions that we'll use to debrief it. So take a look at this video. As you watch the video, reflect on, you know, what are some of the things that the counselor is doing that may be ineffective and not really adherent to an MI approach. And also think about the approach the counselor is using. How is the patient or the client responding to that approach? Okay, so let's take a look at this video and then we will debrief.
I understand that your asthma symptoms have been just really out of control. So we need to look at some of the ways that you can get healthy and not be back here again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely don't want to come back here, but the doc said, Oscar, my dog, is connected to my asthma symptoms. But the ridiculous part is I've had him for 12 years before, and now it's a problem.
Well, you sound a bit surprised by that, but I'm sure that you've seen some of the material that the clinic gave you about asthma symptoms and managing your asthma, and pets are a really big source of problems in that respect.
Yeah, but let me just clarify. I've seen the materials. I have them. Mm-hmm. I haven't read them. All I've been doing is taking the medicine, so I don't know that much about this.
Well, wait a second, Sal. What do you mean if you, as an, you know, to be informed about, I'm just really taken aback by that, because I understand from your chart that you have a young baby, a new baby.
Giancarlo, yeah.
And you are very concerned about your health. You want to be there for your baby, and that you've already taken some steps. You've almost quit smoking, mm-hmm. which is fantastic. So the next step is to really deal with the dog, deal with the pet. I know it's going to be hard to do that, but there are always people who will adopt animals. I'm sure that you have friends or family members.
This is a little too much. Wait, now, first of all, Giancarlo is taken care of. That's fine. He doesn't have no asthma from the dog. It's just me. I don't have...
It's you that I'm worried about, Sal. It's you that I'm worried about, okay? The symptoms are worse. You've had 2 or 3 major asthma attacks. And do you appreciate how this is a risk to your life, that there are some adults with severe asthma who actually can die as a result of their symptoms? It truly is something to take very, very seriously. I can't emphasize that enough.
So Oscar's gonna make me die. He hasn't made me die in 12 years. And the doctor's saying, oh, I don't know if it's the stress, the finances, the drinking. So what are we doing saying Oscar could make me die? I've had him for 12 years.
Sal, do you understand that what happened 6 years ago or 10 years ago, your asthma is progressively getting worse. You know very well that the puffers, the strength of the medication is getting higher and higher. And there's only so much that can be done with medication alone. You know this.
Well, they can keep giving me more medicine and give me the strongest one, and I'll keep Oscar.
Sal, you're almost on the strongest one. And if Oscar's that important to you, then do you put Oscar higher than your baby, than your wife? Like, that makes no sense to me. Do you understand how important this is?
I understand that I don't think you get my situation. I've had this dog for 12 years. So I'm not just going to up and get him out of my house when I don't even know if that's the main thing.
Okay.
So let's talk about what we saw going on in this situation. So a couple of questions to think about as we debrief this, and we'll go to the Syracuse office first. So why do you think the client reacted negatively to the healthcare professional? How did the healthcare professional provide information to the client? And what could the healthcare professional have done differently to engage the client? So Syracuse, let's start with your feedback. What did you think about the approach that the counselor was using? How did the client respond to it?
Anybody in the office?
She was aggressive.
Yeah, her body language showed that she was not supposed to pay attention to the person who was speaking. Like, so she showed that, oh, she was there just to be there.
She didn't have no compassion for him and let him speak.
Yeah, she was forcing the facts on him and not understanding where he was coming from about his personal situation. Instead, she was just telling him, like, you got to do this regardless of how
Trying
you
to
feel.
force him into what she wanted.
Yep, pretty much.
And being judgmental.
Yeah.
Yeah, let him not get his words out.
Yeah.
Definitely not listening.
Not listening.
Made him feel bad about something.
Yeah, it made him feel bad. Yeah, no, these are great. So let's start with the first one about body language, right? The way she looked like she didn't want to be there. I do want to point out, in motivational interviewing, the words you say, yes, they are very important. However, what your client sees first is the body language. And so your nonverbal communication, your body language, your facial expression, your tone of voice can very much make or break the relationship you're trying to form with your client. So that first comment from the Syracuse office is very important, that the person just didn't look really interested, didn't look like they wanted to be there, and then looked like they were getting very frustrated with the client and the decisions that they were making. Another point the Syracuse office made was, just like really trying to force facts onto Sal. And as a CHW, your job may be to inform your clients. Yes, you have to inform them about resources. You may have to provide them some education. If you're talking to them about vaccine or the COVID vaccine, educating them about that. However, you do not give that information or those suggestions until the client has welcomed them. And the client is not going to welcome or receive those suggestions if you haven't built a relationship and a rapport with them. And we saw that this practitioner was not doing them. One of the things that threw me off was at the very beginning of the conversation, the practitioner says, we need to look at your asthma. And what bothers me there is using that word need, right? And I think Syracuse had said, like saying you have to do this, you must do this, you need to do this. Those words should not be used in motivational interviewing, right? So if we wanted to switch our approach, we need to stop making it so directive and so imperative and make it more about what the client wants. All right, excellent. Thank you so much, Syracuse office. Let's go to the Schenectady Avengers. What are your thoughts on that video?
Stop eating pistachios. Anna, so the woman one was attacking this man, was being dismissive. she went to the point of being very abusive, right? As it regards his chronic condition. If the dog was a trigger, right? Well, then let's talk about, hey, young man, right? This might be triggering asthma attacks, right? So let's talk, what ways can you think of minimizing danger, right? What is the flu? The shedding, right?
Yeah.
Things of that nature. She went as far as telling him that he was abusing his child.
Yeah.
That would have been reason enough. I think Mickey reacted very, I mean, most of us here would have gotten up and say, see ya, right?
Yeah.
I will see you. So I think that's not the way to, and it is the way, right? That many healthcare workers approach, right? They know the diagnosis is the prognosis that is the issue here, right? It's the prognosis.
Absolutely.
And how not only to deal with stuff with a whole lot of prednisone and steroids, right? But how do you create a safe environment? And it's easy freaking to do that. Shit, get a freaking air purifier, right?
Absolutely, there are options. Absolutely. And my concern is that part of MI is we're supposed to be exploring what the person's values are and what's important to them. And this woman was completely dismissive of the value of the dog. I mean, she was just like, well, what do you love your dog more than your own child? Right. And she didn't really see how important the dog is to Sal. And that getting rid of the dog is not even something that Sal has thought about. But you're absolutely right, Anna. I mean, we could have said, I know the dog is really important to you, and the dog is an important part of your life, and you don't want to lose the dog. Would you be open, or how would you feel about discussing some options to maybe minimize your exposure with the dog?
Well, what role does the dog play in the family?
Yes. Oh, that's a great
That's
question.
it.
I love that. I love
Don't
that.
touch my dog.
I think Casey had one more point.
Yes, Casey.
I'm sorry, Casey.
Well, you kind of said it. I was gonna say it would have been healthier if she would have seen the pushback that he had when as it goes to his dog, and maybe suggested other ways, because he brought them up himself. You know, that he was almost finished like quitting smoking. Like she could have helped him get to actually quitting smoking or lowering his stress levels. All of those things can worsen your asthma. So if he was pushing back on the dog, which is basically a family member, you're asking me to get rid of a family member that I've been around for 12 years and I love.
Right.
And honestly, if somebody told me on top of all the other stress in my life that I had to get rid of my best friend, I would start smoking again. So
no, you're right. You're right. That's something that she's not even thinking about. You're right. He's going to experience stress if he's to lose the dog. And then absolutely, he has other behaviors. And, if we think back to that video with that, the patient, we were focusing on weight. One of the clips they showed towards the end was like giving them options, right? So, okay, your asthma has been uncontrolled. Let's take a look. We could focus on the dog and figure out ways to minimize your exposure there. Or if you like, we could maybe explore some ways to minimize your smoking. Or we can focus our conversation on how to manage your stress more effectively. All three of those things are contributing to his asthma being uncontrolled. So why not put the client in control and let the client decide what it is that they want to focus on, right? So that's really important. So thank you both, Syracuse and Schenectady, for that feedback. I think that's really helpful. And so one of the things that really stand out to me in this video is the fact that, to me, I got the impression that the counselor came to that meeting with an agenda. Here are a list of things that I need to talk to Sal about. And I'm going to get through this checklist before I, finish this meeting with Sal. And you could come to a meeting with a client of some things that you would like to address throughout the conversation. But ultimately, you need to start with asking the client where it is that they want to start. What do they want to start with? What do they want to focus in? So instead of saying, we need to look at your asthma today, we should say, what are some of the things that you're concerned with, Sal? What would you like to talk about today? What is Sal's agenda? So before I get into my agenda as a counselor, what is it that Sal would like to talk about? All right, wonderful. Thank you all so much. So we are going to pause for a quick vax fact. So I know a lot of you, the main intention as CHWs is to try and engage your clients into getting the COVID vaccine. And so I'm going to mute myself and let Consolo talk briefly about a quick vax fact.
Thank you. So just coming back to one of the first things I talked about on the slides yesterday was some of the vocabulary. Antigen was one of the key. I'm not going to put you on the spot right now, but because I know we're in motivational interview mode. And this is, like I said, there's a list of these in some of the other resources we have, so you can review the vocabulary. But an antigen is a small piece of the virus or bacteria that your body recognizes as foreign and that builds up the antibodies to fight it. Remember, so then it's going to have those antibodies. Your body will remember that, and then if you're exposed to the actual virus or bacteria, you'll be able to be defend it sooner. You might not even get sick, or if you do, it'll be less severe than if you had not already had the vaccine. And for the corona vaccines, they target this spike protein. That's the antigen that they target. And I'll just note also that all this motivational interviewing that you guys are doing today as it relates to vaccination, when you run into someone who is resistant to discussing this at all, like a lot of these techniques we're talking about today will be very useful. So that's kind of direct application, like the last how not to do it with someone who does not want to address their health issue. This is similar to that, and I like the first one where he said, you know what, let's talk about this next time. And then you're not going to move them necessarily to getting vaccinated on the first attempt. It might be just that you're opening a door to further conversation. And I'll pass it back to Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Consolo. And you know what? Actually, I just want to highlight what Consolo said because it is really important. Some people will argue, like if we think about that video we saw earlier with the doctor and the patient, and they were talking about the wait. Some people will argue like this is going to take forever because, you could tell in the first conversation that he had with that patient, they really didn't get to dive into ways or plans to manage the wait, right? But he at least set it up that, okay, next time we meet, how do you feel about talking about X, Y, and Z? So somebody may say, well, gosh, we had this whole meeting and we didn't even set any goals. We didn't make up any plan. Like there's no plans that were made, right? No action plans were made. And people will argue like that just takes too long. But to Consolo's point, you might not make any progress as far as your client getting the vaccine after the first meeting with them. But you may have built a rapport with the individual. The individual might start to trust you more. The individual might be at least open to hearing a little bit more. And then in the next visit, once they've had some time to reflect on it, you can then talk to them, okay, so what do you think would be the next step that you would be comfortable in taking? And the thing is, okay, it might take 3 sessions to get them to take the vaccine versus the 1 session where you scare them to death and they're afraid if they don't get the vaccine. But the thing is it doesn't lead to long-term behavior change. So with COVID, there's a very high likelihood that there'll be a 4th vaccine that we have to get, right? A 4th shot, a booster. And so you're there now to get them to get the 3rd shot, the booster. You're forcing them, you're coaxing them, you're convincing them. But then what if you're not around for that 4th shot? And then you're not there to push them, force them, coax them. And because you didn't use motivational interviewing, they never came to the decision as to why it's important for them to get the shot. You want them to continue that behavior even when you're not around. So even though it may seem like maybe the first meeting we didn't make a lot of progress, you actually do make progress, because the more we get the individual to decide on their own reasons for making that behavior change, for getting that vaccine, the more likely they will comply to that behavior moving forward. So thanks for mentioning that, Consolo, because I think it is really important for us to realize, like, yes, it might appear as though these are longer, more drawn out conversations or over a period of time. But the fact is, in the end, it brings about long-term behavior change, where often if we don't use that approach, people will relapse to those previous behaviors. So the health outcome at the end is more negative when a non-motivational interviewing approach is used. Okay, so now that we've gotten the foundation, we defined what MI is, we know what the spirit of MI is, we know that it's important to honor the client's autonomy. Let's move into the skills and techniques associated with motivational interviewing. So the first, the thing that we're going to talk about now is this acronym referred to as OARS, O-A-R-S. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see what each of them stand for. So again, one of the main techniques used in motivational interviewing is OARS. So two things, if you went to an MI class and somebody said, what were the most important things that you learned in MI? You should remember the spirit of MI, that acronym CAPE, and the technique of MI, which is the acronym OARS. So O stands for open-ended questions, A stands for affirmations, R is reflective listening or using reflective statements, and S is summaries or summary statements. So these four basic techniques create the communication style of being a guide and supports that when you work with your clients. So we're going to focus, our first one is going to be on reflective listening. So what is reflective listening? So let me open this up first to the class.
We have one there.
Okay, Syracuse, go ahead.
Reflective listening is just taking the time to listen to what someone's saying and being able to relay that information back to them in a manner that isn't judgmental or disheartening.
Perfect. So we're going to listen to what somebody says, and then we're going to offer that idea back to them, maybe in our own words, right? Maybe we might tweak it a little bit to ensure that we've understood them. So thank you very much for that, Syracuse. Also, Bryn, who is on the call, wrote in the chat box that reflective listening is to show you are listening by repeating words or ideas the person has mentioned. Absolutely. So thank you both very much for that feedback. So let's go to the next slide. We'll take a look at the definition. So reflective listening could involve taking a guess of what the client means and reflecting it back, or simply restating their thoughts or feelings in a slightly different way. So there's different levels of reflection, right? They have simple reflection. Simple reflections is just really either repeating or rephrasing what the person has said. So the person makes a statement and we could say it back to them word for word. That's repeating. Or we could maybe change the words around a little bit, but still stay within the same meaning. That would be rephrasing, right? Those would be your simple reflections. But we can also do a complex reflection. And in a complex reflection, we are taking a bit of a guess. So in complex reflections, you could do what's called paraphrasing, where we might want to guess what the person is going to say next to continue the sentence, or we might want to make a little bit of guess, dig a little bit deeper into something that they said, or we might want to focus on the feeling or emotion that they're conveying in their statement. So they might not say they're angry, but their statement might appear as if they're angry. And we can say, so it sounds as though you're very frustrated with this decision you're trying to make. So complex reflections are really important, and you are taking a bit of a guess. And sometimes you're going to hit the nail on the head. Sometimes you won't. I'm going to kind of misquote Dr. Miller, but there is a quote from Dr. Miller that basically says, reflective listening is not about like hitting the ball out the ballpark, right? It's just being able to get your bat to touch the ball. right? We're just trying to get at bat. That's all we're trying to do. We might hit it out of the ballpark. Great if we do, yay. If we don't, it's okay, because we're at least showing our clients that I don't know if I'm fully understanding the message you're trying to share with me, but I'm trying to understand it. And I'm going to continue to ask some questions and trying to reflect back what you're saying to ensure that I've understood you correctly. Right? That is what the importance of reflective listening is. So next slide, we'll take a little bit more look at reflections. So reflections are based on careful listening. So we have to listen very carefully to what the person is saying. We need to try to understand what the person is saying. And like I said, simple reflections are you're repeating or rephrasing. We could do that. Or we could go to a more complex reflection where we paraphrase it, or we try to take a deeper guess about what the person is trying to communicate. So it's a foundation of motivational interviewing. I will say, of the 4 skills of open-ended questions, affirmations, reflections, and summaries, reflections are the most difficult. They're the most challenging. You really have to practice those, and they're so important. They really are the foundation of motivational interviewing. Okay, the next slide. So besides making sure the person feels heard, right? This reflections make the person feel validated. It can also, you know, again, as a complex reflection, highlight maybe an emotion that the person is feeling. So like I said, you could repeat, you could rephrase. An empathic reflection is, again, looking at the feelings or emotions the person might be conveying. Or you could paraphrase it or reframe it, maybe look at it from a different perspective. So they're all different types of reflections that you can do. Now, I will tell you, simple reflections are often done at the beginning of the conversation as you're starting to try to understand what they're communicating. But as you get deeper in the conversation, it's those more complex reflections that become really important. Okay, the next slide, if we look at how reflection helps to ensure understanding of the patient's perspective, it tries to emphasize his or her positive statements, and it diffuses resistance. So we're going to talk after lunch about change talk, right? Things that clients might say that indicates they want to make a change. So, you know, but they also might have, again, if they're ambivalent, they might have reasons they don't want to make the change. So you, as the MI practitioner, you can actually focus on reflecting back the statements regarding change, right? And that kind of moves the conversation along. And using reflections is a great way to address resistance. So when a client seems very resistant to changing a behavior, using reflective statements to ensure that you've heard them can actually diffuse that resistance. So resistance occurs most often when the client feels a perceived loss of choice or freedom. And a reflective response really tries to move away from a power struggle and more towards change. So I'm going to acknowledge, you know, like if we go back to that patient, he used reflective statements and said, you're really frustrated that you had to wait so long in the waiting room before you got in. And I hear that can be, you know, that can be really frustrating, and your time is valuable to you. Right. And that kind of disarms the individual a little bit. So reflections can be very helpful with disarming an individual. So basic framework that you would follow for a reflective statement. So you might ask an open-ended question for the client. So how have you been managing with your exercise program? Right? Open-ended question. The client says to you, you know, I don't know, it's been really hard. I was exercising for a couple of days and then I got sick and I stopped exercising and I don't really feel motivated to do it again. And so then you will reflect back. So what I hear you're saying is that when you got sick, it was hard for you to stay on your exercise regimen, but exercising is really important to you, or I shouldn't say but, and exercising is really important to you and you want to get back into your routine. And then you follow it up with, did I understand that correctly? Did I get that right? See, it puts the onus on me. Did I make sure I understood it correctly? And if I didn't, it's my job as the MI practitioner to make sure I understand it correctly. Right? So I might ask a follow-up open-ended question to really ensure I understood it. All right, so I'm going to give you one of my examples that I have, and then we're going to do a VAX example. So Consola, we can just stay on this. We'll stay on the other slide for a moment, and then we'll go to that. So I'm going to read to you a statement, and I'm going to show you examples of the different types of reflections, right? So I said that there's simple reflections, and then there are complex reflections. So let's say you have a client that says to you, I am so sick and tired of people always telling me what to do. I mean, really, where do people get off thinking they have the right to say that? Okay, so that's what the client says to you. Now we could do a simple reflection. One option is we could simply repeat what they said. You are sick and tired of people telling you what to do, and you can't believe that people think they have the right to tell you what to do. I just repeated it. And remember, reflections are statements. They are not questions. So be careful of your tone of your voice, that it doesn't inflect up at the end versus going down. We want to make sure it's a statement, not a question. Okay, so that's one way. And often the repeating is good to disarm somebody who seems like a little bit resistant. It's good at the very beginning. I will tell you, the repeating, be careful how often you use it, because after a while it could become irritating if you keep using it. So it's just a good one to start in disarming them. Okay, so I could also rephrase it, which rephrasing is a simple reflection. I just tweak the words a little bit. So I could say something like this back to the client. You don't like people telling you what to do, and you think it's rude when people think they have the right to do that. So I still have the same meaning. I captured the same meaning. I just, I switched words around. I used like similar words. Okay, so that's simple, often used at the beginning of the conversation before you've gotten a deeper understanding of it. So let's try a complex reflection. So again, the client says to you, I'm so sick and tired of people always telling me what to do. I mean, really, where do people get off thinking they have the right to say that? So a complex reflection, I could paraphrase it a little bit, and I say, you don't like when people don't trust your judgment, and you don't believe you don't like when people don't trust your judgment and don't believe you can make the right choices. So you can see there, I paraphrased it a little bit, and I made it more about not that you don't like being told what to do, but that you feel like people aren't trusting your judgment, right? So I shifted the focus a little bit. I reframed it. Now, another thing I could do is maybe take a look at the emotions, right? This is called an empathic reflection, and really tap into the feelings. So you are furious that people think they can tell you what to do, and dealing with that is exhausting, right? So the person is furious and exhausted. Those are some examples of a complex reflection where we look at emotions. So I just wanted to share a couple of those with you just to give you an idea of it. So what we're going to do now is take a look at some reflection examples where it's specifically with the vaccine hesitant client. So I'm going to need 2 volunteers. So I'm actually going to, let's see, I'll look at my listed names here. So Consola, we could go to the next slide. Okay, so you'll see in the left-hand column, right, the first column on the left, it gives you, it tells you what they are, right? So we have repeating or rephrasing. Those are simple reflections. And empathic reflection and reframing is more complex reflection. So actually that's a misprint where it says rephrasing. That should be a simple reflection, not a complex reflection. And then your empathic reflection is a complex reflection. That's really trying to understand the patient's feelings or emotions. And the reframing is kind of like the paraphrasing, where we're trying to maybe change the focus or have the client focus on something a little bit different than what they initially said. So again, our complex reflections, we're taking a little bit of a guess. Okay, so let's see, Schenectady. We're gonna start with, let's have Casey in Schenectady. Would you be willing to be a reader?
Yes.
Okay. So, Casey, you are going to play the hesitant person for each of the 4 scenarios, okay?
Okay.
All right. And then let's Syracuse. How about Janaea in Syracuse? Would you be willing to be the CHW? Would you read the CHW part? Janaea, are you open to doing that?
Yes.
All right, excellent. So we have Casey and Janaea. So Casey, you're going to read the first hesitant person statement, and then Janaea will give the reflective response. Then you read the second statement, and we'll go back and forth like that, okay?
Okay.
All right, Casey, whenever you're ready, you can do the first one.
I don't want to get the vaccine.
Can you hear me? Oh. You're saying that you don't want to get the vaccine?
Okay, let me pause real quick, Janaea. So, and I'm actually glad you did this. So remember what I said with reflections. They are statements, not questions. So make sure at the end of your statement, your voice doesn't go up, because that indicates like you're not totally sure. And a reflection is you're trying to confidently show the person that you heard them. So Janaea, can you just re-say that statement, but make sure your voice goes down at the end, not up?
You're saying that you don't want to get the vaccines.
Good, excellent. So Janaea heard Casey, no question, and repeated exactly what Casey said. All right, excellent. Casey, will you go ahead with the next one, please?
I want to get the vaccine because it would protect me and my kids, but I don't want to be pressured to do so.
Okay, Janaea, you're up.
You're feeling pressure to get yourself and your family vaccinated. And at the same time, you're saying that getting the vaccine is important to you.
Good, excellent. So it's a statement being made. What I like about this reflective statement is that Janaea is exploring Casey's ambivalence, right? So Casey has reasons to make the change and also reasons not to make the change. All right, excellent. Casey, okay, now we're going to go to our complex ones. So Casey, go ahead, the next one.
Jesus.
You probably never had to go through anything like this.
Okay, Janaea.
What are you going through right now is very difficult for you.
Good. So really what we see there is Janaea, you know, because that was a combative statement, right? Casey made a combative statement, like you probably never had to go through anything like this. And our natural reaction might be like, no, I had to get the vaccine myself, but that's not what we're trying to do in reflection. What we need to acknowledge is what you're going through right now is difficult for you. It's not about me, not about if I've had the vaccine before. It's about you and that this is a difficult situation. So you can see that there's a bit of a shift and focusing more on the feelings that the client might have. All right, Casey, the last one.
I keep trying to schedule a vaccine appointment, but I don't have time because of the kids and my job.
Okay.
You got a lot of responsibilities that take up your time, and you like to figure out a way that you can schedule a vaccine.
All right, good. So we see in that last one, thank you so much, Casey and Janaea. We see in that last one that we're kind of, instead of focusing that the person doesn't have enough time to get the vaccine, we're acknowledging that we need to figure out a way, right? The time is an issue, but the focus is that we need to figure out a way to make this schedule work, right? How can we fit the vaccine in with your schedule? All right, excellent. So let's pause there for a moment. I just want to open it up for some feedback. How are we feeling about reflective statements right now? What are your thoughts? Let's go to Schenectady first. Schenectady, what did you think about this exercise and reading the statements? How do you feel about reflective statements? Do you see some value in it, and if so, what?
Yes, it can change the way a conversation is going.
It can.
You know, determine upon how you react to the patient.
Absolutely. So you know, even though we are there to guide the conversation, as MI practitioners, we can somehow direct the conversation because it's up to us what we decide to reflect back, right? We could reflect back the fact that they don't like being pressured, or we could reflect back the fact that they want to get the vaccine to protect themselves and their children, right? It's up to us what we reflect back, and that will kind of guide the conversation. So you're absolutely right. That's very, very good point, Schenectady. Syracuse, how about you? What are your thoughts right now on reflective statements?
Syracuse, anybody online?
Yes, this is Juten. Yeah, I think this is the first time that I really understand reflection, the simple reflections and the complex. Like either you can repeat the same statement back, or you can restate it the way that it will be understandable. So I think that's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's not just about simple reflections. Thank you for that thing. It's not just about simple reflections. Like those complex reflections, the last two on this slide, those are going to allow the conversation to go, you know, a little bit deeper, and it can really try to strengthen the conversation and deepen the conversation. And again, reflection, and I think it's challenging because we often, when having a conversation with somebody, and we often, as they're talking, we're thinking about what question do we want to follow up with, you know, what question do we want to ask the person? Or do we want to, like, you know, I want to show them that, like, oh, I can totally relate. I've gone through a situation like that. And in reflective statements, that's not what we're doing. You're not asking questions. You're not giving advice. You're not giving suggestions. You are simply showing the person that you heard them. Now, in the original role play that we did earlier this morning, you had a lot of, you're practicing a taste of motivational interviewing, right? So we gave you a series of questions to ask the individual, you know, to ask your partner about a situation that they were feeling torn on. So what we're going to do now, so we could go to the next slide, Consola. What we're going to do now is we are going to change it up a little bit. So you're going to work with the same partner that you had this morning. So I think for Schenectady, it was Mickey, Gabriel, Queena, Eric, Casey, Khalid, and then Shalonda, Amy, and Anna. And this time, if you want to switch the role that you were. So if you were the speaker before, now you can be the listener. Listener can now be the speaker. And for our groups of 3, you can switch around who was the observer, make it somebody different. And Syracuse, I know you guys, it's difficult to move there. So whoever you were working with before, work with the same person for the role play. But this time, just switch roles, right? If you were the listener before, be the speaker and vice versa. So you're going to have, again, 1 speaker and 1 listener. The speaker is going to do the same thing. The speaker is going to describe something that they would like to change, right? What is something that you're thinking about changing? Maybe you're a little bit hesitant about it. And I'm going to time this. It's actually going to be very firm. I'm going to give you 90 seconds to talk about something you are trying to change and that you might feel hesitant about. And then I will announce, okay, 90 seconds is up, stop. Now, during that 90 seconds, the only person speaking should be the speaker. The listener is just listening. But remember, in MI, it's also about your nonverbal communication. So I want you to be showing your partner that you're listening by being mindful of your body language, your facial expression, all of that, right? Show you're engaged and paying attention and focused on them. So you'll have 90 seconds as a speaker to speak. And then after 90 seconds, I'm going to call time. And then I'm going to say, okay, now the listener has 60 seconds to reflect back what they heard. And in those reflections, you are not asking questions. You are not giving advice. You are not giving suggestions. You are simply restating, rephrasing, expressing or tapping in or identifying an emotion that maybe they're expressing, paraphrasing or reframing what they said, but you are not asking a question and you are not giving advice or suggestions. We feel good about that? Thumbs up? All right. Okay, so you're with your partner. Just decide real quick who is going to play the speaker, who is going to be the listener. So again, you can switch roles. Okay. So if everybody could stop, and then Consolo, maybe like in 15 seconds, you can broadcast to them to stop.
Sure.
All right. So now what's going to happen? So the speaker spoke for 90 seconds about something that they're thinking about changing, but maybe a little hesitant about. Now our listeners, you're going to have 90 seconds. And remember, I don't want you asking any questions, offering any advice, giving any suggestions. All I want you to do is use reflective statements to show your partner that you were listening. So you can repeat it. You could rephrase it, maybe tweak the words, change the words around a little bit. You could acknowledge maybe an emotion they were displaying. Maybe they didn't say the emotion, but maybe you got the feeling that they are feeling a certain way. Or you could paraphrase or reframe it a little bit and pick something else to focus on in some of their statements. Okay, so I'm going to start. You will have 90 seconds, listeners, to do this. Okay, you can begin. Okay, let's pause there. All right, so you've had the opportunity to have the speaker share something that they're thinking about changing. And then we have had the opportunity for the listeners to show their listening by using reflective statements. So I want to open it up. Let's first, so we're going to open up to 3 different people. We'll start with our Schenectady office, then we'll go to our Syracuse office, and then we'll do our group that got together virtually. And that was Clifford, Dutdang, and Von Trees. All right, let's go to Schenectady first. So Schenectady, who there would like to share what this experience was like for you? I want to hear 2 things. I want to hear what it felt like to be the listener and only giving those reflective statements back. Was that a challenging process for you? And then I want to hear from the speakers, what did it feel like to actually have 90 seconds to speak uninterrupted? And then what did it feel like to hear those reflections back? All right, Schenectady, what do you have for me?
As a listener, I didn't find it like challenging to be a listener, but I think that plays into like my personal practices in life. But what I did find is that even if you have like all these great like skills or whatever, like it still takes intention to be intentional. And that's what it was. So like intentionally paying attention to how many times I was gonna say it, but like paying attention to what the person is saying, and in that listening, like picking out what they're actually saying as opposed to like what you're just hearing them say on a surface level and what they mean, without making too much assumption as well. So like I think intention is what was really like important in this, just like I don't know how to explain that, but just being intentional in general. Do you want to talk about
that's I want to just comment to that, and then we'll see who else wants to respond. That is so important. I'm glad you said that, because MI is about being intentional. You need to be present and you need to be putting thought into your responses, and those responses should be intentional. And yes, I agree too. There's a fine balance, right? We do take a bit of a guess, right, in our reflective statements, but if we're really listening and we really are starting to understand the individual, it shouldn't be so much of a risk. And we want to make sure we don't cross that line where we're not making too many assumptions, because that can be off-putting as well. Schenectady, is there anything else that anyone in your group wants to add?
I was a speaker this time, and one thing that was hard for me was talking about myself, I guess, for 90 seconds, because I don't speak a lot. Mm-hmm. So I try to, I don't know, I guess I use a lot of filler just to get to a point. Yeah. So I can like drag it out, but in just like try to get to the main points and then stop talking, I guess. Like I try to route myself to the end as quick as possible. So
Yeah, when you call in the 90 seconds and up already.
yeah, so like I'll be done first, but like realize that I just threw a bunch of substance at someone all at once, and I'm expecting them to have it all down. But
Yeah.
that's about it.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Listen, it's, the way conversations often are, it's like back and forth, and the 90 seconds definitely could have felt uncomfortable. But the idea is if we really allow the individual to have time to speak uninterrupted, because most people are used to being interrupted, uninterrupted, there might be a little bit more substance that comes out of it, right? So, and again, you follow your client's lead. If they say it for 45 seconds and they don't have anything else to add, and then we can reflect back. If they say a lot in 90 seconds, then that's the challenge for you as the MI practitioner is, okay, they just said a lot in 90 seconds. What are the things that I want to highlight in my reflection? All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Schenectady. Syracuse, what are your thoughts? Anybody in the group would like to share?
Phone go first.
Anybody in the office?
I already feel that when I learned from being a listener that I don't know, I just listen. It's like my reflection. I'm just getting my body language like, yeah, I've been there. I've been like put myself in that situation. So okay, yeah. Like make sure my person, make sure my speaker, make sure I'm there to understand them maybe put myself in their shoes. Yeah. Be that, all right, this is what your bill was. Okay, I'm gonna put myself in there.
That's
a third person point of view.
Go ahead.
I did the speaking and listening, both on the speaking and listening, pretty much, we had a decent conversation, we both got we had a conversation on COVID and, kids being vaccinated. We had an understanding of where we both stand and where we come from, like coming from on the understanding of kids, vaccinations, and when they should get them and stuff like that. But, it's more like we educated each other with little things and came up to agreements, and it was
That's a really good point. And I want to emphasize, in motivational interviewing, your client could be talking about something that you disagree with. And that's okay. You don't have to agree with them. It's not about agreeing with them. It's about what was just said, about really trying to put yourself in their shoes and understanding their perspective. Now, if the client wants to do something that you agree with, wonderful. That makes it much easier, right? But it's the challenge is when you don't agree with it, right? And then you have to make sure that you don't be judgmental about it, right? And you try to really empathize with them. And empathy is hard. I mean, we always say, yes, we have to empathize, but sometimes empathizing is very hard, especially if it's a situation that we don't necessarily agree with the decision that's being made or the behavior that's being displayed. All right, thank you so much, Syracuse. And then let's open it up to our virtual group. This was Clifford, Dang, and Fontrice. Does anyone from that group like to speak?
Yeah, I was the. Oh, go ahead.
So I was the speaker, and I just described, I don't know, a generic situation about gaining weight during COVID, blah. Not sure if I wanted to lose weight and all that jazz. And he was a great listener and was able to reflect on what I spoke on.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And Dang, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I grabbed the message, because it was like too much for me within the 90 seconds. So I was struggling how to collect and put it in and repeat back what she really said exactly. So thank God that I got it.
Thank God you got it. You nailed it on the head. So I want to actually just make a comment so Vontrice shared with us that she was talking about weight loss after COVID. And so if I was partners with Vontrice for that one, Vontrice was speaking and she started talking about, maybe losing weight after COVID, all of that. In my head, as soon as Vontrice said that, lights went off in my head and wow, I can relate, right? I gained weight over COVID, want to lose it, but I don't know if I want to work that hard, got all these things going on, right? So I can completely relate with Von Treese. So as far as empathizing with what Von Treese is experiencing, yeah, I could probably definitely empathize easily because I myself is in a similar situation. But what I want to point out is if I was partners with Von Treese and I tried to relate to Von Treese and I tried to share my story with Von Treese and I tried to say, wow, Von Treese, what you're saying is really resonating with me because I was thinking the same thing. I might be thinking in my head, well, this will connect me to Von Treese. But the fact is that's not reflective listening. All I did was listen to Von Treese and identified how it's similar to me. And so in reflective listening, it's about identifying what they're saying. Now, is there an opportunity to maybe share some of your experience throughout the conversation? Yes. But in reflective listening, all I would have to show Von Treese is that I heard what she's saying. Not that I agree with it, not that I can identify with it, not that I've gone through the same thing or I'm going through the same thing, but just that I heard her. So, you want to think about that. Like, yes, and especially as CHWs, you may be working with clients where you can really relate to their situations and their experience, because often CHWs live in the communities for the clients that they serve. And so we have to make sure that we don't cross that boundary when we're thinking about the reflective listening part of it, that we're focusing on showing the individual that we've heard them. All right, excellent. Thank you all so much for your feedback. I hope you enjoyed that activity. So we're going to move into, so we skipped around, right? We have ORs, we did the R, now we're going to do the O. So open-ended questions. So I want to just see if somebody can give me an example of an open-ended question and an example of a close-ended question. So do I have any volunteers? One example of an open-ended, one example of a close-ended.
An open-ended question could be something like, tell me how you're feeling today, or what are your experiences like regarding this, like stuff like that.
Okay, and then opposite of that, what would be a close-ended one?
How old are you? Are you asking me or just like the group in general?
Anyone, you could answer it if you want, or if somebody in the group.
Are you sad?
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So what are you feeling today? Tell me some of the things you're feeling today. Open-ended. Are you sad? Close-ended. So we can see the major difference between the two, right? An open-ended question, there is no definitive answer, right? There's not one-word responses. Versus the close-ended question is, are you sad? The person could just say yes or no. So I'm going to go back to Schenectady because they gave me the example. So Schenectady, and whoever wants to answer, or who was it that gave, was it Mickey that gave the first example, the open-ended? I think it might have been. So we'll go back to Schenectady. And do you see, which question do you see as more valuable in a motivational interviewing approach, and why?
The first one, definitely the first one.
Okay, and why is that more valuable?
Because it, similar to like the technique of drawing out goals or passions and ambitions, it draws out a more authentic view and expression of like what a person's actually feeling. Because I mean, objectively, someone might feel, or subjectively, someone might feel sad, but like that's not going to give you much insight into why that person feels that way, what that person is feeling in more detail, like who the person even really is, how they interact with stuff. Like it's just very cut and dry, like almost like you're checking a box, like, oh, do you feel depressed today, when you go to like a crisis unit or something. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's like you're not gaining any information about me other than the fact that I am capable of experiencing sadness.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always think about, thank you so much for that. Cause I always think about like those tools, like the PHQ-9 on a scale of 1 to 5, how is your appetite then? Like they're very close-ended and they do feel more like an interrogation. And you're absolutely right. Like if we're trying to evocation, right? We're trying to evoke a person's desire or motivation for change. Close-ended questions, it's going to be very hard to do it. Open-ended questions, Although it may appear as though it takes longer, it actually brings us to the real situation quicker than the close-ended questions do. And really for you as the practitioner, it takes a little stress off of you, because if you were to only use close-ended questions, you'd have to like think about every possible question that you need to ask your client. Instead, you can think about some key open-ended questions that could really either start a conversation or move a conversation along. So we can go to the next slide. So open-ended questions, they cannot be answered with just a simple yes or no. They produce less bias because they allow the client to tell their story. So often, like, did you take your medication? A client might lie and say, yeah, I did, because they're thinking in their head that you want them to say, yes, I took it. So there might be a bit of a bias there, thinking I'm going to give them the answer they want to hear, instead of just kind of exploring what it is, what it's been like for them to take medication. It elicits important information that otherwise might not be asked, right? We might not think of the question to ask. So it gets us to dig a little deeper, and it could draw out the person's experiences, perspectives, and ideas. So when we use close-ended questions, what we find with close-ended questions, they can often damage rapport. It does not strengthen a relationship. It does not deepen. It does not build trust. If we want to be empathetic, open-ended questions are more of a way to create or demonstrate or express empathy than close-ended questions. And again, even though open-ended questions might seem, that they take a longer time, they actually take less time to really get to the meat of the story. So I want to share, before we go to the next slide, so Consola, we could stay on this slide for a moment. I just want to share with you a couple examples of open-ended questions. So some, again, could start a conversation. Some can be used throughout a conversation. So we might want to meet with our client and say to the client, what would you like to discuss today? Open-ended question. And it lets them set their agenda instead of it being about your agenda. How do you feel about meeting with me? Right? We can kind of assess, do they feel comfortable? Are they nervous? Okay, so you mentioned, I'm going to use an example of vaccine hesitation. You mentioned being reluctant about getting the COVID vaccine. What concerns you about that? There's your open-ended question. What was that like for you when you got the first shot? Again, related to the vaccine. What are your views about that? Be open-ended. And even though this is not an open-ended question, it is a statement or a prompt that will get the client to talk more. So you could simply just say, you mentioned, being reluctant to get the vaccine. Can you tell me more about your reasons for not getting it yet? Or not getting it. We shouldn't say yet, because that assumes they're going to get it. Right? So those are some examples. So we have on the next slide here, an open-ended versus a close-ended. So I want you to hear these and tell me if it feels different. So let's start with the close-ended one. Did you take the COVID-19 vaccine already? Versus, can you tell me what your day is like? How does your work impact you taking the vaccine? Okay, so did you take the COVID-19 vaccine already is one question. And then the other one is, how does your work impact taking the vaccine? So what are the feelings that you have between the two questions? How would the close-ended question make you feel if you were the client? And how would the open-ended question make you feel? So I'll open it up to either anybody who's willing or open to sharing it.
The close-ended question puts a lot of pressure, a lot of social pressure on whether or not it's okay to take the vaccine. Depending on who's asking that question and what circumstance I'm in, I don't know how I could feel. I could feel like I'm the only person in the room that hasn't been vaccinated, or the only person in the room that has been vaccinated. But either way, I probably don't want to be in that room.
Right. Right, exactly. So yeah, you might feel like pressured to answer a certain way, right? And you don't really talk about it. So it's because it's making an assumption that you should have gotten your vaccine. All right, excellent. So what about the open-ended then? What does that make you feel? So how is work impacting taking the vaccine or getting the vaccine? How does the open-ended question make you feel?
Gotta say your name before you.
This is Alana from Syracuse. The open-ended question makes me feel like you want to know what's going on, like you want to know the reason why I didn't get it or why I did get it. You know, it makes it feel like you're more interested in what's going on versus, oh, I just want to know if you have it or not.
Yeah, exactly. So the open-ended questions, I'm making no assumptions. I'm not assuming you got it. I'm not assuming you didn't get it, right? I want to know, how did work play any role in your ability or willingness to get the vaccine, right? I just want to understand your situation a little bit deeper. So you can see that there are definitely some different ways of looking at it. It evokes different feelings in the individual, and the open-ended ones definitely more less judgmental and opens up and continues the conversation. So open-ended questions, they typically, we can go to the next slide, begin with the who, what, where, when, why, and how. But I do want to just make a point. In motivational interviewing, they really try to discourage you from using the word why. So I'm going to read you an example, and I want you to tell me which one feels better to you, which question feels better to you. Okay, so we're going to utilize our red and our green papers. Okay, so get your red and your green. So the first question is going to be green. The second question is going to be red. So you're going to hold up which question feels better to you. Okay, so let me read both questions, and then once I've read it, you will hold up your sign. Okay, first question, this is the green question. What are some of the reasons you didn't continue with school after graduating high school? Okay, that's the green question. What are some of the reasons you didn't continue with school after graduating high school? Now the red question. Why didn't you continue with school after graduating high school? That is the red question. So you're going to hold up which question felt better to you. So I'll read it again. Green question. What are some of the reasons you didn't continue with school after graduating high school? And then the second question, why didn't you continue with school after graduating high school? Is the red question. So I see Schenectady is holding their papers up. Oh, Syracuse has got one up. I'm seeing a sea of green. I don't think I see any red. Can't zoom in, but I don't think I see any red. Okay, all right, let's go to Syracuse. Syracuse, why are you all holding up the green one? Why did that question make you feel better?
The red one sounded rude. Yeah, the green one sounded more presentable, how I want somebody to talk to me.
Yeah. That one sounded like somebody's mother just got
like you right, discipline, like
you got to be in trouble.
Yeah, you're in trouble. Yeah, exactly. You felt defensive with the second question. Am I correct in saying that?
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Syracuse. And Schenectady, I'm going to assume that you had the similar feeling that Syracuse had. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, okay, is the why question open-ended? Yeah, it is. It is technically an open-ended question. But what we find with motivational interviewing, when we use why questions, it makes the person feel very defensive. It actually puts their guard up. So when you are creating your open-ended questions, when you're thinking about your open-ended questions, we strongly encourage you to not use why. Avoid the why. You can use who, what, when, where, how, but try to avoid the why, because the why does often make the individual feel defensive. So you're going to choose open-ended versus close-ended. So get your red and green paper out again. Green is open-ended. Red is close-ended. So green is open-ended. Red is close-ended. I'm going to write this in the chat box. I don't know if those of you in the classroom can see the chat box, but I know those in the chat room can.
I can read it to him.
Okay. All right. So just a reminder. Okay. Green is open-ended. Red is close-ended. So we're going to go through each question. You are going to raise the color. If you think it is open-ended, you will raise the green. If you think it is close-ended, you will raise the red. Okay. First one. How may I best help you? Is this green open-ended? Red close-ended? All right, I see Schenectady's answers and Syracuse. Good, you each earned $100. Green is open-ended. Consola will be sending you the $100 shortly. All right.
If you're calling it, you can just type in the chat. You know.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Thank you.
It's Schenectady. They were shouting out their cash apps.
Thank you for Venmo, Zelle.
I broke the screen on my phone, so I'm unable to send anything. So Jenny, take care of that.
What a shame. And I owe you. All right, next question. Do you need to see a doctor? So green is open-ended, red is closed. And again, our online people, you can feel free to write in the chat box. All right, I'm seeing a sea of red, and you are correct. That is closed-ended. Excellent. Now let's go to the next one. What kind of information are you looking for? Green is open, red is closed. All right, nice. All greens, that is correct. It's an open-ended question. Number 4, are you taking your medication? All right, excellent. Sea of red, it is a close-ended question. Number 5, what would be most helpful for you? What would be most helpful to you? Good. All sea of green, and yes, that is an open-ended question. Number 6, have you started exercising? Good, we're getting the hang of this. All reds, good, close-ended. Number 7, does this answer your question? Good. All reds, close-ended. Correct. And the final one, what do you make of the information I've given you? Good, excellent. I see a sea of green from both Schenectady and Syracuse, and yes, that is open-ended. So you all got 100%. So I think you deserve some type of reward for that.
Jen, I don't know if you mind me jumping in for a second and just say that in the chat, that went the next level and kind of spun one of them in from closed to open. So are you taking? I think the goals are you taking medication? Are you taking medication? Yes, no. Then how are you doing today? And kind of trying to spin that a little bit.
Perfect. All right. Thank you, Detang. And you're actually one step ahead of us, because what we're going to do now is we're going to try to rewrite a couple of close-ended questions and making them open-ended. So if we go to the next slide, Consolo, we will take a look at these. So I'm going to actually, why don't we do this? Consolo, we could pull the whole slide up. And I'm going to ask each of you to maybe pick one or two and rewrite it to make it close-ended. I don't really care which, you could pick whichever one you want. So take each of these, one or two of these questions. Right now, they're all close-ended. They're all close-ended questions, and we need to rewrite them into open-ended questions. So the folks at Syracuse and Schenectady and the folks that are online, just pick one or two questions and rewrite it to make it open-ended. And then I'm going to open it up to the both classes to share their thoughts or their suggestions. So I am going to give you about, let's do a minute and a half. So a minute and a half to rewrite maybe one or two of the questions, and then we'll see what you come up with. We're at 1.5 minutes, so let's stop here. Okay, so I'm going to open it up to both Schenectady and Syracuse, and then for our folks that are online, if you would like to type in the chat box the one or two that you came up with, that would be wonderful, so we could hear yours and acknowledge them as well. All right, let's go to Syracuse first. So I'm gonna, let's do 3 volunteers at Syracuse.
We'll go in the classroom first. All right, go, Mr. Ali, your group.
Yes, we pick the number 4, and we change it to what are your reactions when you're feeling stressed?
Good.
Okay.
Because we're not assuming food has anything to do with it. We're just asking when you feel stressed, what's your reaction? That's great. All right, excellent. So number 4 was rewritten. What's another one that you have at Syracuse office?
Next group.
We did number 1, do you have work experience? And then we put, to make it an open-ended question, what kind of work experience do you have?
Very good. What kind of work experience do you have? Wonderful. Okay, let's let Syracuse do one more. So we did number 1 and number 4.
That one. Which group?
We did go
Yeah, go ahead.
Number 5, the original question was, do you want to work in a job where you help people? We rephrased it to, would you like a job that helps people?
Okay, all right. So I'm going to tweak that one just a little bit, because would you like a job that helps people still could be responded with yes or no. So what I would change that and just say, what are your feelings about working in a job that helps people? And then that would make it a little more open-ended. Excellent job. And listen, creating open-ended questions are not easy. Sometimes we're going to get it wrong and they're going to be close-ended. But here's what I will tell you. Your clients will let you know if it's close-ended. Because when they're only giving you 1 or 2 word responses, you're going to know, okay, I got to switch these questions around because they're really not adding to the conversation. Von Treese is also from Syracuse. Von Treese says, so the first one, do you have work experience? Von Treese says, what type of work experience do you have? Excellent. Von Treese also said for number 9, don't you want to quit smoking? Oh, I'm sorry, Von Treese, you're Schenectady. I'm sorry. Von Treese also wrote for number 9, don't you want to quit smoking? And Von Treese rewrote that as, what are your thoughts about quitting smoking? Excellent. Wonderful job. And then Clifford, and I think Clifford is from Syracuse, rewrote, I quit smoking. How do you feel about quitting smoking? Okay, so that is an open-ended question. The first part, I quit smoking. We want to be careful about divulging too much personal information. Sometimes, you know, with giving personal information, the question always is it beneficial to my working relationship with the client? So we always just want to ask ourselves, is this going to make the client feel worse? Is it going to negatively impact the relationship? Or could it actually be positive to the relationship? So Clifford's is an open-ended question. That first part, it's good to reflect on sharing personal information. You always have to ask yourself, why? Why am I sharing this? If it's going to benefit the relationship, then it's helpful. If it doesn't, then we might want to refrain from doing it. All right, thank you so much to Von Treese, Clifford, and the remainder of the Syracuse office. All right, so we heard from Von Treese from Schenectady. Now let's open it up to the Schenectady office, the Schenectady Avengers. So which ones do you want to give? Do 3. So.
I did number 3. I'm not sure if that one was already done. But,
no, yeah, that one hasn't been done yet.
I said instead of like, are you taking your medications the way your doctor prescribed? I said, are there any challenges or roadblocks you've encountered with your prescriptions or medications since you've been prescribed to them?
Okay, so that is wonderful. I would just take away the "are" there at the beginning and just say, what are some of the challenges or barriers you faced in trying to take your medication? Just to tweak it a little bit. All right, excellent. Any two more volunteers from Schenectady?
Did anybody do number 4 yet?
Number 4 we did, but we could hear yours. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, so I just wrote, can you tell me more about psych, just kidding, that's not the one that I wanted to do. The one that I wanted to do was yeah, so do you eat more when you feel stressed? And then what the question I was can you tell me about some of your eating habits when you're feeling stressed?
Okay, wonderful. I would just say get rid of the can you, right? Because that's somewhat closed. Or if you say, can you tell me about your eating habits? No, I would actually take the can you and just say, tell me a little bit more about your eating habits when you feel stressed. And again, the can you one is a tough one because it is somewhat open-ended, but the person could just say, yeah, I can tell you, but I don't want to, right? So the can is a little bit tricky. So maybe remove the can you and just say, tell me a little bit more about your eating habits when you're feeling stressed. All right, excellent. And then Schenectady, one more. What do you have for me? One more.
I did do you eat any vegetables? And my retort to that was, are there any foods you are allergic to at this time, and what are they?
Okay, so again, get rid of the are you, because that'll make it closed. I would just say, what are some of your food sensitivities, or what are some vegetables that are, I don't know, what are some vegetables that are difficult for you to eat? Maybe something like that. Just get rid of the are you, because that makes it a little that makes it more closed-ended. Does that make
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Yes.
So I want to say, we get to the close-ended part. People are like, oh, it's so easy. I know what an open-ended, close-ended question is. It's actually not that easy. There's many times that I find myself, when I teach this stuff, there are many times that I find myself thinking I'm asking an open-ended question when in actuality it's pretty close-ended. But the good thing is that your clients will let you know if you're not asking an open-ended, because their responses are going to be very minimal. And you want to dig a little bit deeper. So to dig a little bit deeper, you're going to have to ask those open-ended questions. All right, wonderful. So let's go to the A in ORS, which is affirmations. So we know in interviewing, it's all about building confidence, right? Building our clients' confidence so that they could feel, ready and prepared to make a change in their behavior. So how do we build a person's confidence? Affirmation. Affirmation statements are recognizing our clients' strengths. So they're statements of recognition that highlight a personality trait, highlight their values. It is important to building and maintaining the rapport you have with your clients. And in affirmations, no matter what the progress is, it could be big or small, it's important to acknowledge it. Sometimes you might have a client, they just showed up to their appointment. Just thanking them for being at the appointment or arriving on time in the appointment is an affirmation statement. So sometimes it might be harder than other times to come up with an affirmation statement. But in either case, it's very important to use them. It's how to build their confidence. So an example that's on the slide here, you're very resourceful in finding healthy food options in your neighborhood. Okay, affirmations, they're highlighting, like I said, we can go to the next slide. There's strengths, efforts. Sometimes, we might want to highlight a past success and just say, I know in the past you have maintained a healthy diet, and that's great. That's wonderful. Can you tell me a little bit more about what you did to maintain your healthy diet then? Again, it's all trying to build their confidence. And how do we do that? We acknowledge the strength. And it could be strengths they're currently displaying or even strengths they've displayed in the past. Okay, so we're going to do a quick exercise working with your same partner. But this time, I would like you to turn to your workbook. And you will see on, I have it in page 6. And you know what, Consolo, I'm gonna, if you could stop sharing and I'll share this handout so that they can see it. So it's on page 6 in your in your workbook. I have exercise in my brain. And it gives you a list of affirmations, different things that you can say that would be, lead you towards an affirmation statement. So you're very persistent. You always have a positive outlook. You're very hopeful. You are dedicated to making this change. You are eager to change your eating habits. You're always willing to open to hearing other ideas, right? So these are just some words that would help you in making an affirmation statement. So what you're going to do is you're going to get back with your partners that you were with before. Let's switch roles, right? So this is the third role play. So if you were the speaker the first time, that means you were the listener the second time. So for this third time, you're going to be the speaker again. And again, in your groups of 3, keep rotating it around. So you don't want to always be the observer. And what you're going to do is I'm going to give 2 minutes on the clock, 2 minutes. And I'd like the speaker to describe what they have done to improve their health. So the speaker is going to share with their partner something that they have done to improve their health. It could be now or it could be something in the past. So something you have done to improve your health. And the listeners, what I would like you to do is to demonstrate affirmations in that conversation. So when you say something back to the speaker, I'd like you to make sure it's a statement of affirmation, acknowledging their success. All right, everybody, if you could stop, we're at 2 minutes. So I'm gonna close our other room so people will start to come out. All right, so let me just open this up and a quick debrief about what you felt as the speaker, or perhaps what it was like as the listener to give or receive an affirmation statement. So let's go to Schenectady. What are your thoughts on the affirmation statements?
As far as the person listening to the affirmation statement?
Yeah, so this said what they did to change or improve their health, and you had to make the affirmation statement. So how do you think the speaker felt hearing that statement, and how did you feel giving the statement?
Maybe she's
giving the statement, it was, you have to, it was a little challenging in this instance because we are all a little bit closer, not to go overboard, right? You usually don't have a whole bunch of nice words sitting there in front of you when you're talking to someone. So it was like, I found myself like running down all of the C's, like in a row, and just, gushing with compliments. So it was fun in that regard.
All right, that's very helpful, Schenectady. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, we have to remember, obviously this exercise is focused on only giving affirmation statements. We don't want to go over the top because we want it to be considered sincere or received in a sincere way. And we want it to be authentic, and we want it to be congruent, meaning that our affirmation statements are being given because they match a behavior or an action of our client. Okay, all right. And Syracuse, real quick before we go to break, any thoughts from Syracuse on this activity?
Any thoughts, you guys?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes, Edwin. Yeah, it felt good to affirm to my partner, Ryan, because when you see somebody is trying to do something for her health to make it better, and you affirm it in a positive way, then I think it feels good. If it's genuine.
Absolutely, it's genuine, exactly. So just to wrap up before we go to lunch, I want you to remember the affirmations are to build their confidence, to show it's, and it is a form of reflection. We're showing them that we're hearing them, but we're acknowledging their strengths, trying to build their confidence. And affirmations can be very helpful, especially if a client is showing a little bit of discord or anger or resistance. That can kind of diffuse the situation a little bit. Okay, so we are gonna go on our 1 hour lunch break. We'll arrive back at 1:30. So we're gonna log off of this call. We have a different Zoom link. And I will see you all promptly at 1:30 to start our second half.